thank you for joining us. So I think now we can formally start now that the coffee tea has also been ordered. So maybe we can start. I'll just give a brief introduction. I don't think there is a need for so much of an introduction because we are all friends here. But Hammurabi and Solomon, we are celebrating our 25th year anniversary this year. And we started in 2001, and from there on, the journey has been a very interesting one from 2-member to now a 128-member team across the country. We have our offices in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Chennai, and Ranchi. So these are the offices that we have, and in terms of the focus areas, of course, because I personally have been specializing in dispute resolution, arbitration, and litigation. That's one very key area of practice for us, and there are partners who are dedicated along with me who work on some of these areas of practice. The other very key area of practice for us is corporate M&A, because we do a lot of work around restructuring, M&As, and both through NCLT route and otherwise offline as well. And the third very important area of practice for us is public policy and regulatory support, where we work extensively with the government and with the organizations and these industries, voice their concerns with the government in that sense. So this is one very niche. We started very late in this in 2011, but I think we were one of the pioneers so far as public policy and regulatory support is concerned, because there were very few law firms at that point of time focusing on this area of practice. And we have been instrumental in working on a lot of those bills also, including the Commercial Courts Bill. In fact, one of the first drafts that were drafted was from our office. And we have a lot of those to our credit, including the Arbitration Act, the amendment that had come in 2019, and including the suggestion for Arbitration Council for India. It was a thought a little ahead of its time because the government is still mulling over how to set it up. But I think it will make a lot of sense and put a lot of things in place if we have an arbitration. So that was one of the thoughts that we had shared. We have also worked extensively on the national mining policy on behalf of some of the industry players in this regard. And so that's about the policy practice of the firm. The other very niche area of practice for us is real estate and infrastructure. So that's again an area of practice that we have developed a niche in terms of working. So this is the key areas of practice. And then the other areas of practice that we have focused on a lot more now is technology and data protection. And I think lawyers like Rahul, we have Tanuja, and there are some others in the firm as partners who are working a lot more on data protection and technology law. So I think that's become a very, very key area of practice now, in fact, in the last couple of years, honestly. Other than that, I think the labor and employment has, again, suddenly taken a lot of discussion points. So we are working a lot on the implementation of the labor code. We also, in fact, have the Deputy Chief Labour Commissioner retired who has joined us and is helping us in terms of the practical implementation of the labor code. So we take a lot of his assistance during the discussions with clients in terms of the implementation of the policies. So these are like some very important areas of practice. But the other important areas of practice also for us is white collar crimes. We work a lot on white collar crimes. PMLA, ED related issues, FEMA related issues. So that's another area that we work quite extensively on. And other than that is insolvency restructuring. So I think insolvency is again my pet project. I really love doing that. And there are again partners who are focusing on insolvency matters along with me. So some of these are like our areas of practice where we have been focusing a lot more. I think that's largely about the firm. And now I think we can start with the topic of discussion, because we have been working with GEM very regularly. And it is in the context of having discussions with GEM is when we realized that the use of AI in public procurement is actually taking shape in a very different manner. So it was with that context that we thought that this would be a good topic to talk on. So I think the opening statement for me would be, just imagine a government ministry which deploys an AI system to evaluate a vendor bids. The system rejects your company's application. You ask for the reasons. The answer you get, the algorithm flagged it. So that's it. There is no rationing, no appeals process, no human in the loop. Now, if you have to explain this to a court of law, that it is a system which has flagged it and that there is no human intervention involved, how will the court interpret it? So I think this is where there is this probably could be a black box running a public function without a face. So India has crossed a significant threshold in March 24, and the cabinet has approved the India AI mission approximately of almost 10,000 crore program to build the sovereign AI infrastructure, develop the indigenous large language models, and position India as a global AI leader. Now, with over 38,000 GPUs which have already been made available, there are 4 homegrown startups which are building the India-specific foundation models that it wants to make AI in India the same way it made mobile phones and solar panels in India. But here's the tension that nobody in the room can actually afford. The very speed of that ambition is outpacing our accountability frameworks. And nowhere is that gap more visible or more consequential than in public procurement. I think with that starting note, I would request Yashodhara to take over from me and probably put a note and then the right questions to the right speakers and then to Rahul.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Little background, I'm Yashodhara Roy. I work with the firm. I'm a principal associate of the firm, operating out of the Mumbai office. And I've been with ma'am for the last 4.5 years now. This topic, like ma'am rightly gave the foundation, the reason this became of heavy importance to us is primarily because of the clientele of public procurement that we have been servicing for the last 2 to 3 years. And even without AI becoming a boom, because we were with these procurement agencies, we realized that simple things like show cause notices, presentations, competent authorities are now literally an interface. It is equivalent to the CPC of income tax. And even that has its own challenges. That is itself not a foolproof model, but now it has seeped into the procurement zone. So talking about how the absence of documentation intertwines with, let's say, an Article 14 or an Article 21, how does it stand the test of the law today in a court of law? Because we face this in a writ court, and we realize that there is no right or a wrong answer. There has to be a human at the end of it. But how the algorithm itself is being checked or not in a public procurement, how trade secrets are being protected, how this entire interface of selecting, let's say, a vendor, for example, in Zepto or Blinkit, how the vendor selection itself works. So there, we have realized that AI has seeped into each and every corner, and there are legal implications of which are probably addressed in various laws, but there is no integrated platform of addressing it. There is no check and balance for it, and we are still in a competition. We are evolving still. So that is why the theme as such, that AI and procurement, they are completely two different things, but it has become a reality today. So we try to bridge the gap, and given the fact that Bangalore is a tech hub, given the fact that there is going to be a huge tech exhibition coming in November of Bangalore, we thought that we should start the conversation early on, and hence this. And to start with this, my first question would be to I am hoping so, because you're right next to me. So my first question.
Yeah.
So I think I would just keep it, first of all, a very primary question, that when we are currently dealing with the hurdle of integrating the modern AI driven, how do we see the legacy government digital platform who lack these APIs or real-time exchange capabilities? How do we see that integration happening in terms of real procurement, where we are no longer procuring goods, but we are procuring intelligence? So should we categorize themselves, that category itself, as a procurement for service? Is it a hardware? Is there a source code? How do we see it? And how is the traditional legacy government portals integrating it? So that is my question.
Understood. Thank you very much, Shudra. So basically, see, when I like to kind of share my thoughts on the procurement part, I think financial sector, specifically fintech, is one area where there has been a lot of clarity in terms of how this entire procurement process and all these things happen. It is because of two areas, because of two major reasons. First one, obviously, we had this RBI FEI policy. So basically, what they have specifically mentioned, the 26 recommendations what they have given, that is something which is basically a real kind of a game changer, specifically for a sector like fintech. But they have more clarity in terms of where you go for procurement in terms of AI areas. And very specifically, they mentioned about the 6 pillars that definitely helps us in terms of the accountability, the responsibility, and the entire piece of it actually. How we use AI in terms of fintech in fintech space. Where probably there is not much of clarity in other sectors. Okay, so that is point number one. So I'm specifically referring from my industry. Basically, it's going to give a more kind of thought process on that. So that is number one. The number two part of it is that we always had a discussion amongst our senior management, that whether it's a build or it's a buy. So whenever we had that concept of build versus buy, so challenges what we thought both from build and buy perspective is that we'll be having these issues like starting from if we are using an AI, say let's take a buy. So we have taken one of the largest vendors, global vendors actually. We are kind of being a fintech entity, so our major role is to see that all the platforms are working properly. So we have a specific platform. Based on that, we provide technology and backend services to all the banks. Because banks, most of the banks are our customers. With the nationalized banks, the global banks, and all. With the private sector banks and global banks, it's much better than we can make them understand and all. But the challenge comes when you deal with public sector banks, because they do come with a lot of kind of challenges and questions like how you are going to ensure that there is safety, security, and all those aspects are taken into consideration. So what we do basically, what we have done with these vendors, like when they have given that technology and all. So our model is something, we are a legacy company started in 2004. So basically our major business area was stack querying, issuing and switching, which probably helps all the banks on the back-end technology services and all. Reconciliation, credit card management, debit card management, ATM reconciliations and all. Now there obviously when you are coming from a legacy system to a AI generated technology support and all, most of the bankers also become a little concerned like how you are going to apply. So when we have when I sat down with our vendors, we have made specific use of certain things. Like see, we obviously want to adopt technology, but that should be in the four corners of the policies, what has been framed so far. Because we are all grappling with the thing that AI, specifically in India, we don't have any specific law as of now, as we speak. But we are taking basically the best cases from European AI law, or the best AI framework and all that we take. And obviously, AI and the government, the meeting policy has given a lot of clarity in terms of how we use that. So that's basically the thing what we see, and what we have tried to do is that let's take a AI by design policy.
Right.
So instead of kind of looking at the final product and then we go back and do all the changes, let's integrate the human in the loop and all the policies and processes at every stage. So that when we are giving the final product, finished product, those challenges are not there. And as she has rightly mentioned about the human in the loop, because this human in the loop is something which all these policies are also referring. So you cannot have a product, final product, without having human intervention. Right. That has to be there right from the beginning. Right. So that's the second piece. The third piece is basically like when you are dealing with the vendors, the third parties and all. So some of the things they tell you like now we are foolproof, everything has been looked into and all. But we do go like InfoSec and legal team, like my InfoSec and myself are closely working with those vendors and all the third party and say, like, see, we have to see what is the data trail you are maintaining, what kind of data audit rights what you are giving to us, what kind of checks and balances you have in terms of this entire process and all. Because see, they sometimes come and say this is our product because see, we are using the AI because of we are using the agentic AI from them for all our codings and all. That is one aspect. And we are also heavily using cloud in our organization to see that all our presentations, board presentations, starting with everything. So we are heavily relying on that. So some of the things we still find as the intersection of data privacy, IPR, and AI, that's still a challenge. But we try to see that we are at least setting our house from our end, so that in future, even if there are challenges, we at least have checked from our end, like those things have been addressed. So it's a still an ongoing process, I will say. But just to sum up, basically, fintech is one area since we use technology a lot. There has to have the use cases of AI. Otherwise, it will be very difficult because when you see a competitor who is using the best AI methods and cases and all, so obviously the companies will have to pivot their model. But we have to see that all these governance measures and regulatory measures what has been prescribed so far, as far as the governance globally as well as India, that is taken into consideration. So just to finish on this one, so obviously I think the procurement part in financial sector, I think there has been a lot of thrust. I'm not specific about other sectors, what is the things are happening, but yeah, financial procurement.
I have a short follow-up.
Yes, yes.
So when we talk about creating a distinction between, let's say, an IP disclosure or a governance compliance,
Yeah,
how do I legally create that boundary for my regulator who
Yeah.
wants to know what is the logic behind there is a blocked payment? So how do I create that difference when this is IP disclosure versus, let's say, a government compliance? What is the?
you see, in certain cases, Shodhara, you will have to kind of disclose that to the government bodies and all, because otherwise, if you're going for a kind of a specific patent or technology and all, it cannot be there cannot be a scenario where you cannot disclose and build that. So obviously, it needs to be done, and that's exactly the common question which comes between patent and trade secrets also. Like if it's a trade secret, how can you move and tell that government it's a trade secret? So this challenge will be there. But the way to interpret this thing is that you have to make them understand what is the underlying technology behind it and why am I using it and what's exactly is the purpose. There will be challenges. In say RBI case, there will be a lot of sandboxes and all. We have to really use their sandbox technologies and methods to.
So I would be reluctant to disclose my.
Absolutely.
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 So maybe I can think of specific limited NDAs to the auditors.
Yes.
Or impress upon them the need for maintaining this one. Or maybe a sandbox or a closed loop escrow. With a lot of lock in it.
Right.
I wouldn't be so much happier with that.
Absolutely.
So, Pranshu, if you would like to ask regarding, so now that sir has actually laid the bed for the escrow conversation, I was hoping that Pranshu you could sound, because the next obviously would be the source codes. So over to you, Pranshu, please.
Yeah, thank you. So my next question is to Mr. Acharya, just building on the background that Mr. Debashish mentioned about AI governance policy of India based on 3 sutras, 7 chakras. So one of them mentions about accountability, what we all have come across. So as India is sharpening its focus on sovereign AI governance and the platform accountability, so Zepto being an Indian origin platform, how is Zepto preparing like its vendor selection and ranking algorithm to meet these emerging standards of domestic regulatory transparency and the accountability? So over to you, Mr. Acharya.
Yeah, I think these questions have been addressed long ago for companies, specifically on the commerce side. The expectations, the trust, right? Trust is more about, and I think most of it's already talked about in the public domain by your sellers in the marketplace, restaurants who are fulfilling orders through food apps, etc. The question was always as to like how this ranking would work, right? Because companies would always keep these algorithms, obviously like machine learning, when we say, very confidential for obvious reasons. So how this entire piece work would be always a questionable from the user standpoint, like the seller standpoint. So this has been addressed by people upfront, like bringing some fairness, giving away like how this algorithm work. There are tech blocks written by most of the companies now, right? Available public. Government were asking about it. Like then everyone start feeling about like this. This is more about fairness, and therefore we have to like address this first through written block. Not that every details of it, right? How this entire function work may not be in the public domain, but I think 70-80% of those information is already in the public domain.
Right.
So that
Anu, tell me something. Are you accountable? Because what Shweta was saying, and are you as in Zepto, I'm talking about anybody. When we don't have an AI regulation, we don't have a strict law, it's all good to have, whether we're talking about 7 sutras or anything it is. It's a good thought in good direction, but what is the penalty? And I just heard somebody talking about NDAs. At least I finished my law in 2000, in 26 years. I have never experienced any litigation on NDA.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you. Whether there is any penalty for like, having your algorithms in written certain way, right? And also operate them. There is no penalties, right? there is, I don't know, anything that could be recognized as of today, it could be penalized.
I have a different.
But I think you may want to look at from a, CCI point of view, anti-competitive practices, all of those, that could be, as a resultant of the, algorithm biasness, etc. But most of it, like, it's whether there is a fairness, yes or no, is a moral obligation for the companies at this point.
Yeah, because I
so
think
that-
Shweta already said that there's a black box. We've already agreed that there is a black box, there is no audit, and there is no accountability. So we are now slightly.
So I have a point. So see, I believe risk as also have been identified in the EU AI Act, which has been categorized in the 4 points.
EU AI Act is
No, I'm not going
extreme
there.
other end. Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
talking about the Indian Consumer Protection Act 2019, wherein if these systems or tools are being implemented, there is a three-way responsibility of developer, deployer, and user. And if there is a issue of biasness or any kind of 7 pillars have not been taken care of, there could be a possibility of
Just came.
deficiency in service. Because I believe that there is a cause of action in deficiency of service, wherein you can say that this risk has been there, which has not been addressed, and the harm has been done by this particular tool to certain segment of people, then there is a possibility and cause of action under the Consumer Protection Act. That is my interpretation and understanding at this point of time.
But outside of consumer protection, it will be just a contractual obligation.
Yeah,
that
contractual
requires-
So,
So that will be very specific to only his industry, like
Yes.
consumers.
Yeah, but I think
Rest of us have enterprise
I
consumers.
think it is beyond, consumer protection and also, like, now biasness is not necessarily have to be, in violation of any consumer protection. Rights, right? So these consumer rights are not violated, but there is some moral issues which not amounting to a consumer rights being infringed. Then Consumer Protection Act cannot provide
Absolutely.
So,
See, I would say it's evolving, like say today, deepfakes. Against deepfakes, all the big actors are getting copyright protection. It's not yet available to the common man. So that way it's evolving. And to Sudha's point about in India, there have been a case maybe around 2-3 years ago in Bengaluru when there was a pilferage of personal data. A person was actually imprisoned, a lower rank employee. Of course, we all know about the famous case in Uber versus Google in US, where the individual who pilfered trade secret was actually imprisoned. That's the US, not in India, but we will head there probably.
Basically, see, your point is very valid. So as of now, we don't have any.
No, for your sector, RBI has put across very transparent rules and it's very implementable, and it's, I mean, probably, hopefully going to be something which, leads the way for everybody else also to incorporate. So fintech, I understand because, RBI is 25, it's extremely transparent. I was just saying from the perspective that just now we are in a good to have state, like we are all contemplating on what we should do. But the fact remains that responsible AI is more of a company's own adopted measures saying that, okay, we are responsible to be able to showcase a lot of other things that we're doing, but there's no penalty provision as such. There's no clause which will say that, okay, you haven't.
Yes, so there is no specific legislation as of now, as we speak. But we have governance and policies around RBI, MeitY and all. But probably the law which is on the anvil, the Digital India Act, probably as it comes out, so probably it is going to give some more, throw some light on that specific thing. Probably Digital India Act is going to address some of this.
No, but the DPDP Act also casts
Yeah.
certain specific obligations
Yes.
on developers,
On
AI
developers,
developers. So
yes.
they have to
Yes.
disclose the
Yes.
underlying data from where, they are securing.
Exactly.
This has the sovereignty element also.
Basically, to ensure there's no data scraping or,
Yes.
illegal.
Yes.
So I think what is happening, especially in India, couple of laws are still evolving, including the DPDP,
Right.
On the other hand, it's your labor law. It's always been a complicated thing. And then came AI. Today you see one AI doing big money put in, and somebody says, oh no, this is not working. So that is also changing. I think the fundamental question both the government and the private need to understand, and I think most of them are answering, is that who is an AI, right? Clearly, when you are talking to an AI, whether it's an agent AI or generally, it's you're not collaborating. That means you are giving something, they're doing a specific job, specific thing. they're solving certain problems, but coming back, how they're doing it at the back end, nobody knows and nobody ever will know, and that's why it is artificial intelligence, right? And hence, the question they're answering is that, but where does the buck stop?
Yeah.
The buck has to stop somewhere,
Correct.
right? I'm having my team using an agent, so everybody needs to identify that. Once that is identified, there are several laws. For example, that there's a Companies Act. Companies Act is very clear. You cannot escape, right? Because the board is ultimately there. The board has delegated power to people. So the regulators will go after after eventually, to the board, and then board will come after the people. That's very clear. That's not going anywhere. Second is a Contract Act, right? That's going to be there, taking us to the court somewhere. Then your Consumer Protection Act. Now coming to IP, right? Now that's an era where just by my personal feeling, my personal take on this, I've been in the industry for so long, just by talking about AI law, it's not going to solve. Parallelly, we need the new age IP laws over there, which quickly can catch up, right? Because see, the regulators who are looking at AI are also knowledge lawyers, right? So people, like we were in a group of people talking to several artists, right? For my husband's special birthday, his brother sent a song. And I said, wow, and my friend said, hey, call them to Bangalore for Durga Puja, they will play the drum and do the... I said, no, he's one person with an AI, he's created a song and done it, right? Now, here it's his word, he has not plagiarized and all that, but done it. So the artists are talking about it. And so, I think we need to all collectively come together as an industry. Currently, this is exactly why the data privacy law has taken us so long to come over here. This is exactly why the labor code has come, taken so long. So I think quickly from the industry, that's where, since you have a public policy, policy practice where that you can play a phenomenal role over here. Pull the relevant people from everywhere. Let's not discuss in isolation. And then get together and do that. Till such time, I think let's not either be complacent or relaxed and say, hey, AI, so I can put my hands up. No, it is not. Somewhere somebody is accountable is my view. I have been advising and guiding as a company secretary, as a lawyer always, that no, you have to know who's behind it and forget about the law and the policy, because somebody somewhere will come after it.
Thank you so much, actually, Ananya. And that is the whole idea. Start the discussion somewhere, because the discussions are happening, but all of the discussions are happening in isolation, in bits and pieces. And probably
I think the India's bill is already trying to shift from just happy to have responsible AI to some kind of like Lakshmi was mentioning, binding accountability. That's when I think your entire thing that, okay, if it is the developer, they are accountable. Where is it that, there is a gap?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Pranchu, going back to you, sorry.
Yes, so no, that discussion actually helped me to realign my follow-up question to Mr. Acharya. So as we discussed and as the concerns were pointed out, so AI governance policy of India is actually focusing and emphasizing more on the self-regulatory regime through maybe self-certification or internal or industry audit, right? So keeping that in mind, and my question to Mr. Acharya is like, if future Indian regulations are mandating all these procurement-related data has to be stored and processed as per the sovereign in the Indian infrastructure. So how your platform has to re-architect your entire system, which is actually currently majorly depending on these global cloud providers. So what is in place for your platform right now? If you can just shed some insights.
Yeah, I think firstly, I would appreciate like government coming up with the guidelines rather like just bringing an act to regulate.
Right.
I think we need some more time to actually analyze, learn from it, and then probably may decide on our own regulations in a later point in time. Right. The biggest problem is now most of our regulators don't really know like what this is about. You may think like what you would have if you would have heard about techlash, which is generally apprehension towards like what technology is capable of. AI is also that. Right? And it can actually astonish you with results. People would have not expected things. Like you would have not expected delivery in 10 minutes. When we did it, it surprised, right? Similarly, like this is also. When it comes to can we indigenously build, right? Machine learning has always existed. There are a lot of dependencies, like we used to avail technology and the service providers from mostly US, right, or UK. This India is like now taking time to build their own, tools to, do certain tasks within the company, not relying on external service providers, right? I'll just give you an example. Entire warehouse management service solutions, right? Till recently, as recent as about 10 years ago, India had none, right? Thereafter, like, then the supply chain has become very, very relevant and important, and also like deal with large, quantities like Amazon, Flipkart, right? They started building their own. Amazon obviously, like, you can't like call it indigenous. So is the case for others, right? People started realizing as like, see, data is very important. Should you build on your own and process this information on your own, right? You're not having to rely on third-party service providers. That led to developing everyone's their own platforms. When Zepto started, it's a small company, right? You can't expect that they would bring in a lot of resources, right, and build something which they are not even sure of it that business will sustain for about a year or more, right? When generally startups or maybe someone who's an entrepreneur wanted to start, right, want to experiment, try whether this works or not, he may not even himself will know. We did not know we grow this big. Right? It happened because of various factors. Right? One being the customers who loved our services. We gradually build our own tools. Entire warehouse management services is managed through our own software today. We internally call it Thor, but not to risk the IP issue. But it's the internal name that we call it Thor because it actually helped us build our own supply chain, and we have a great cold chain processing systems in our place. One of the best in India as of today. To get here and also to get somewhere like you want to like build your own learning modules, it is not possible for us to like put in so much of our resources. Why would you like invest so much for money and efforts to build learning models? The data that required to like have your learning models in place and also to process data to get your learning models to be updated, right? It is very difficult and very expensive, right? And the infrastructure is too expensive. So that
So Pandu, yeah, I want to add there again. I want to interrupt you here. That Indian government has started this India AI mission and they work with CDAC and to address this need which you just highlighted, which is very true that GPU infrastructure is extremely expensive and it requires a lot of capital. So they have started renting out GPU for 65 rupees an hour. So, for startups and anybody who cannot have their own resources. So I'm just saying the government is moving in the right direction. And it's
I appreciate that, this AI, guidelines that we have today is best, right?
Yeah.
That's why I was saying, we should really like encourage to have more entrepreneurs to adopt, build something indigenously, right? Obviously, infrastructure is something now available at least. Great, right? 65 rupees is still high. If you were to ask me first.
We used to go to cyber cafes, remember when I was growing up, when we didn't have our own computers and laptops and we used to go to cyber cafes to surfing. So I think this is now government's way of upskilling, making people used to it, and at least getting acquainted with what exactly is it that GPUs can do.
Yeah.
So look.
Or moving to consumption-based models completely, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Instead of actually purchasing, the government acts as a procurement arm, but finally sets up consumption-based models so that it's available, accessible.
Pay as you.
Yes,
go.
pay as
Pay as
And
you
also another thing to Pranshu, not every data sovereign AI. sorry, sovereign AI
Right,
doesn't mean that no data can go outside. It is just the sensitive
Right.
data which you can't send. And even that is for, I mean, government hasn't notified the negative list, but that when that
right.
comes to certain, countries. So although, I mean, the initiative of sovereign AI is there, but it's not like, oh, none of the cloud service providers, like for Pandu's company, nothing can go outside. That's the idea.
Financial, see, Sudha, in
Right.
financial sector, this has been mandated long back in 2018 only.
Financial, yes.
Okay.
It's specifically mandated the financial data. Right. And they are the upper end about the data protection.
The usage, 65K. In fact, there are thoughts of tier 2, tier 3 cities also, where the power consumption, the infrastructure consumption is much more lesser. And that's where the consumption part, the rates also goes reduced. And that indoor is a classic example where they have built up huge, this one, GPUs, etc.
And point linking it to the geopolitical situation a bit, okay, right? If a bit of restrictions on global transfers is limited, the domestic innovation will obviously go up to serve the country, right? And that I think in the future will have a geopolitical advantage because we don't know how the world is working, right? And dependency on a foreign country for running your key business operations, and we've seen the oil crisis now is not going to be very helpful for the future generation and the way the world is evolving, right? So I think a bit of a restriction in the short term may be a pain, but in the long term.
See, it's a given today, defense, energy,
Yes.
telecom.
Yes.
You have to compare AI with that.
Correct.
You have no choice.
Correct.
You have to sustain it.
Correct.
Otherwise, today, US is blackmailing everybody else.
Right.
So that's why- So AI sovereignty is a must.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Tejaswini, I think you have questions to ask.
Yes, so I have a question for Murli sir, just in continuation of this only. Given the multiple patents that have been filed in AI by your company, how do you respond to the understandable by design mandate in public tenders that effectively require access to the core architecture of your proprietary assets?
Yeah, I mean, just a while ago, I was telling that we are not so easy and comfortable in giving the IP, etc. Of course, we are more on the B2B side, unlike the B2C side. The IPs or the accelerators or the tools which you have built are by and large integratable to various models, with a bit of customization. So to that extent, by virtue of looking into the requirements of the RFPs, etc., you do realize with a bit of customization. To that extent, we can adapt it to the specific needs. Okay, again, we use AI various tools so that the life cycle of development, etc., happens very quickly. So with that as the point, we are quite confident that the adaptability is there, and we wouldn't absolutely be comfortable with sharing the source code, etc. That's where again, we cater it to other customers globally also, not just the Indian customers, and that's the advantage or the edge we have compared to our peers in the market. So we are very clear. We will probably give a broad internal view to that, to the workings of the tool or the process, but we wouldn't be wanting to give the source code. That has been our approach this way.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and my next question would be to Lakshmi ma'am. For the AIs embedded in the products like ADAS or medical equipment, etc., that continue to learn post-development, how do you contractually determine if the IP of the evolving algorithm remains with your company or transfers to a government buyer?
So,
I think this question can be answered by Murli sir and you.
Okay. No, I'll take a stab at it and I'll share my perspective. I think, my organization is involved in manufacturing servers, storage products, and we provide the underlying framework on which, or the underlying infrastructure on which AI models are built. So we partner very closely with NVIDIA as well. So, as part of the government AI mission, we've already been, supplying thousands of servers to the Indian government. And before I specifically answer your question, I'll just set some context. See, the India AI mission has posed a lot of challenges to OEMs, and especially OEMs who are in the business of manufacturing servers or products on which you can build AI models.
Sure.
And
the challenges are firstly, most OEMs do not want to directly contract with the government.
Right.
Because of the payment terms, because of just the complexities that are involved when you directly work with the government.
Sure.
So the public procurement system itself is not the most OEM friendly.
Right.
So we do a lot of GEM work on GEM as well, and we are very active on GEM. In fact, we just recently got ourselves re-registered.
Right.
Just the process of getting re-registered on GEM is an arduous task
Right.
because of the number of disclosures one has to
Yeah.
make.
Yes. Yeah.
And not only do they want information regarding your existing directors, they also want disclosures relating to your shareholders, the shareholders, directors, statutory directors, their passports, their the entire shareholding pattern of your company, which means all the parent company, information, corporate information has to be fully disclosed. And they ask for passports of the CEO, and all of this is pretty new, I would say.
I don't know my passport, my Aadhaar, where are with us?
No, but
We are Indians, but
exactly. So as an Indian company, when you operate as an Indian company, and then you have these sort of requests which have extraterritorial implications, your foreign stakeholders or overseas stakeholders don't appreciate this. They're like, first of all, your country does not even have a robust DPDP Act in place. Why would we share our personal information, especially passport and address and things like that? How do we know it's going to be regulated, used properly? So for an OEM, it is difficult to directly work with the government.
Right.
So in many instances where we even create solutions or AI models for the government, we ensure that we either work with a channel partner or with some other partner who has a direct interface with that government entity, so that it's easier for us to transact, because then we can negotiate based on our terms. So indirect transactions are a preferred mode for most large OEMs, who are providing underlying infrastructure like server, storage, networking, right? And as far as the solution itself is concerned to the question, that was asked, the minute we have an AI model or an AI solution that is bespoke and created for a particular government customer, we have to define the contours around the IP, the usage, what gets disclosed, again, ownership, especially if it is a model. It's very similar to any other bespoke IP, or any other bespoke creation or work product that you would develop. But the only difference being that because this particular product has the ability to create its own information, its own intelligence, then it becomes important to then draw the boundaries in terms of what's going to remain foreground IP, what's going to remain, within the ownership of the government body. So what our organization does is normally we retain most of the IP, and a very, very small portion, even in these AI models, go to the customer. And the reason is because we cannot take responsibility for what is getting developed on its own, right? So we retain most of it because, just before the new DPDP Act came into effect, the previous version had some very draconian language around how liability around AI models would get pegged to OEMs.
That's what I was actually coming to.
Yeah, so because of that, I think a lot of OEMs across, whether it's US based or EU based or Europe based, I think most of them are very conscious of what we are developing, what we are selling to customers, what sort of vendors also we interact with, because see, we may not always have the technical in-house expertise to develop an AI model. We will be dependent on a lot of these startups, and that's what the government, the whole Make in India agenda is to primarily promote. Working with indigenous, either manufacturers or small companies. So because the thrust is essentially on partnering with smaller companies or with local Indian companies itself, so we look for credible organizations like that who we can work with. And we have a program called the Digital Catalyst Program, where we fund a lot of these startup companies, we fund their research, and they help us build certain AI models, which we then partner together and sell to government customers. So it's very tricky whenever you have to define the IP, we have always found it very difficult.
So we own IP in this model of MOU with
So
startups.
we own it. So that's why we fund all their research, right? And sometimes we have people who, like from our organization, they are like sponsors and they work completely with the startup, the startup ecosystem or that company or a series of companies. And then they sort of act as the interface between HPE and those companies. And they let us know every time there is a proof of concept to be shared, like a new AI model, something that they have come up with. So we do a lot of work with CDAC, and we've done a couple of AI models, at least demonstrated or displayed certain AI models for them as well. So what I feel is the tricky part is because OEMs have a greater responsibility when we develop. We're providing the underlying infrastructure and we're providing a bespoke solution because we provide professional services as well, solution services. So the tricky part for us is always to have people who understand the technology itself, because we have some fantastic design or technology architects, but sometimes they also don't understand the technology that they are sitting and developing.
Right.
So sometimes we get consultants to sit and evaluate what we do. So we do work sometimes with PwC or Deloitte,
Right.
get them to do an assessment. Sometimes if we have to get maybe an external agency to audit the AI model, then we get them to step in and audit it. So those are some of the ways in which you can then clearly define what IP is retained by the organization
Right.
and what IP can be passed on. Right. But then even the IP that we pass on, and I have to say this with a lot of, a little bit of trepidation, because when you define especially the IP that gets transferred, there's so many disclaimers that we add.
In fact, that's what I was actually coming to.
Yeah,
So to add to what Lakshmi was telling, I agree on the larger part of the IP, but the far bigger risk is in the indemnities and liabilities. I would ideally prefer to have all disclaimers in my usage of AI, but how the counterparty, the customers, or even the government is trying to look at it. You will not use any AI without my clear written consent. Then secondly, I may want to own outcome of it. Thirdly, you will indemnify me for all liabilities, and they're heading towards uncapped indemnity for usage of AI.
Absolutely.
That's the risk contractually we are getting.
And the thing is, if this AI Act actually comes into effect, then you will have to indemnify. There's no negotiation over there, right?
And that's where the government inside protocols or just
Yes, and the thing is, that's why companies like OEMs like us, or even our counterparts, HP, or probably for that matter, even NVIDIA, they would want to add as many disclaimers as possible, which and probably work with, not work directly with the government wherever possible, because when you work with smaller players, they are willing to accept all these disclaimers. But the challenge lies in the fact that because you have a partner who acts as an interface, they may assume or absorb all the liabilities on paper, but in reality, that's not what plays out. As an OEM, that's still responsible. So we had so many situations. Last year, we had as part of this India AI mission, we had a very significant order from the government, where we were working with a partner, and the partner, for some reason, decided not to agree to certain terms, and they put the entire order on hold. And then later, the end customer started following up with the partner saying, you have not delivered, blah, 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 we are missing deadlines. There are other critical deliverables that we have to support. And the partner very conveniently passed on all the LD's penalties to us. So it was there for not responding on time. And so those are the risks that you, as an OEM runs when they work with the government. We do a lot of direct contracting as well. In the direct contracts, Sir said, everything, we have to agree to everything that is. So exactly. So on paper, all the risks, yes, when you look, non-negotiable. Absolutely. Non-negotiable. Deviation statements are not accepted. Even where they have accepted deviations, they will say, oh, there was willful negligence on your part. They will bring in all those elements to establish that the liability or attributability lies with the OEM. So therefore, it is difficult. So that this topic of public procurement is very dear to my heart. We spend so much time working with our Gen team, the sales team, and we see the problems that come from it. Because you have Gen terms and then you have the specific government terms as well, right? Sometimes they are not always harmonized also. So there are some conflicts there or some overlaps there.
Yeah.
So yes, it's not easy. And I think just to that point, I'm going to go on a slight tangent and I hope I answered your question though. Right?
Yes, very aptly. Thank you so much.
So just one additional point I wanted to make, because Raki made that point about geopolitical implications. This is very industry specific. So a lot of OEMs like Cisco and Dell and like HP, currently we're facing a major challenge when it comes to SSD, which is memory, memory components. And there's basically this whole lobbying that's going on where hyperscalers want to ensure that more and more companies adopt public cloud as opposed to adopting on-prem, or basically they want to ensure that the server business gets closed. So there's a lot of propaganda, and in the US what they're doing, because it started in the US and the Trump administration has not really helped in this regard. So they've created this artificial scarcity around memory and components, okay, because of which there is a huge increase in the pricing of all these memory components. And as a consequence, what is happening is where many of our companies had bid for tenders, with the government, what was probably earlier like 20 lakhs is now close to 1 crore, right? It's like literally increased 3 or 4 times the price. And we are really struggling because despite notifying customers, because all your in-flight deals get immediately impacted, right? So it's very tough because with the government, you can't go and renegotiate your price. Your pricing is all fixed. So, and this is the technology that they need for all their AI models, right? So innovation and so many of their projects get held up because of these kind of geopolitical issues. And further, this war, the West Asia crisis has only exacerbated that problem, right? So there's delays, there's a worldwide supply chain issue going on. So many customers in the past 6 months, my team and I have addressed more than 500 plus complaints from customers because of delays. So these are, I think, problems which are very unique, and we are going to keep facing problems. So you have innovation on one side, and you have all these geopolitical conditions on the other hand, and then you have the industry itself with its own lobby. So there's this weird interplay, and it's very difficult to do business.
Right.
There's no ease of doing business. So for the government who's sitting in the middle of all of this, they want to drive an AI mission, but they have to deal with geopolitical, implications. Then they have to deal with all this artificial scarcity of underlying components.
Right.
It's really tough for them to act to act as an agent which tries to solve these problems, because because they are a customer. They would not want to get involved in solving a vendor's problem, right? But at the same time, they're the government and they can influence a lot of things that are happening outside of the country as well. So we are, I think, in a very peculiar, I would say it's a very dystopian environment in which we are all doing this.
Artificial intelligence can take care of artificial scarcity.
So I think one of the
It's artificial, but it is created by the real
No, I think when it comes to sourcing and backward integration, that will that if it is like we have extended into outside India, and geopolitical issues tend to affect badly, right? And if you don't have protections around it, contracts, and you are gone. And unfortunately, you can't have protections.
Correct.
And actually, one is AI. I think post-COVID, that has been a big learning, like what you said, right? During COVID, what happened? Some of our input ingredients of a food product is to come from China, right? So on one hand, that's not coming because everything is stuck. And on the other hand, our customers, you have your delivery goods and all that, On the other hand, you're also your contract manufacturer with you, and as you said, you only have a leverage of say 10% deviation. Other price idhar udhar hua to 10% I can go, but it cannot be 50%. It cannot be something which was coming by port and which has to fly or wait for ages. It doesn't work. So we face similar, and that's where, as Bandhu said, and the same thing, if you talk about today's geopolitical, and here again and again I bring back to the human factor, because I'm a absolutely believer that the human factor is becoming even more important in organizations in today's world. Let's take an AI. If you see the AI, the way artificially, first of all, the share prices, it's a no-brainer. Today, US, even after the war, etc., if their share market did not have a dent, it was all because of the AI here. Just go and do a check. Every other, India, everywhere, China, I'm not talking about, because China is an entirely different ballgame. Everywhere else it impacted, it was only their shareholders who were not. And that's why Trump did not see a heat over there, because the Americans are very clear, only when their share prices gets impacted, that's where they go down. So that was an artificial. Second is your artificial hike on people's salary, your employability, right? Today, someone who was at a 10 lakh bracket are getting a 1 crore salary and coming over here. Because the hype is over here, everything is done by AI and everything is solved by AI, so you need AI. And on the other hand, you don't have a governance, right? As you said, you don't have a governance, you don't have a choice either. But what I have observed and I have seen, and during now post-COVID AI, it's even more magnified. But even when DPDP was there, I think as an organization, what we try to do, it's a difficult task when we're doing the first phase. Marketing team says, "Mere ko kuch nahi karna. Ananya, why have you invited me for this meeting?" Right? A sales team will say, "Why have you invited me?" Manufacturing team will go, "Why?" But we said, "No, this is where the data is flowing to you. This is where it is going." And I think that's where we are coming, and I can understand your role. Because legal's role, now what is happening. You're no longer just advising. You're there with the business to go talk to your consumers, talk to everybody. So here again, I think more and more we should advocate by while you're doing AI. Are you having well-equipped team members? Like when you're doing a negotiation, can you go and do all the negotiation yourself? My team would be doing it, right?
And when you have a voice, especially in a public procurement.
You have a voice, like she said, government is not action.
And especially when you have all these other external elements influencing the way you work and do trade and business and all that, you need extensive support from the government.
I would like to see one more perspective which in-house legal may face at certain point of time, especially with regard to AI in the public procurement and is the insurance part, right? If you have a single corporate insurance policy covering your contracts both for all the over entrepreneurial business, whereas the public procurement conditions are very different, right? The insurer will sometime, if you really submit a claim, the insurer will come and
As
say,
of now, the insurers haven't excluded the AI part.
Yes.
They haven't come to the market with the separate insurance.
Yes.
So it's all in the cyber. Cyber insurance, if you're lucky, it gets depending on the exclusion.
So tomorrow, if they want to exclude your conventional insurance policies from AI, and if they don't want to bring under the ambit of cyber, you may have to have
a discussion around it, but yes, they will not.
So either under your errors and omissions policy,
Yes.
you can get covered or under cyber.
But this, the tricky part is always the proof of the pudding is when you really submit a claim, right? At that point of time, there is so much innovative explanation about the exclusions that they will somehow say this was not something over which you had a control, right? So how do you then, why should I cover something which is unforeseeable, uncontrollable, force measure, out of your oversight? So all those things. So it's very tricky for in-house counsels to kind of just think over it, like how do you really look at that risk? Because I think
as of now, the understanding is we get covered either under the E and OE.
Yeah.
I mean, when
But you know, as an in-house counsel, especially in a global environment, when Lakshmi mentioned, I used to face it day in, day out. Like, for example, if you're an Indian entity, you need a foreign, you need somebody outside from US or India to be your director. And our MCA will ask you a bunch of questions, right? You have to give your driving license, blah, blah, blah. So, first of all, even for sharing for that, they would say, hey, Ananya, I won't send my email. It has to be a box. Now, I had to explain, okay, you're sending me by box, but please be mindful, it is going and getting in a government. So, the government knows that anybody can pay and know that who is a director and everything. So, that's where the questions would come from there. Where is my DNO? Does it cover? Do I have to come and travel all the way over here if somebody misses a payment over here or you don't pay your PF? And imagine now, so this is still okay, fine, then you have a choice. You choose whether you want to be a director or not, and the board would say, hey, if you're not taking this much risk, you don't deserve to be a global CEO or global CFO. Yeah. And then I cannot see a candidate be seen as a risk averse person. Okay, Ananya. I said, who am I to tell you that whether you're a director or not? Go and tell others, but this is the reality.
So I'm bringing the discussion to an end now because we have already exceeded our time. So thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your contribution. I really appreciate, and there are some key takeaways for us as well. And there is a lot that is required to be done from our end.
Yeah.
And that is where our role comes into play because we have collated all your thought processes and probably will also prepare a white paper of some sort, and we'll seek your contribution in that.
Sure.
And then probably and have some more rounds of these discussions because more views that we gather is how we will be able to strengthen our position in that sense and be able to then, submit it to the government because they are also looking for support from different angles and being, a part of the whole system in ourselves. We are in a position where we can contribute in a meaningful way. So let's do that. And just as a closing statement, and I think the team has helped me prepare it, and what I could gather from our discussion is probably first being an accountability before deployment. Yes. So if your AI touches a public function, explainability and audit rights must be designed from day one. That's one takeaway for me. The legal landscape is moving fast. Early compliance is probably a competitive advantage, definitely not a burden. The sovereignty is a procurement posture. I hear you on that. And India's owned by India PO is real and accelerating. And source code, escrow, IP clarity, and local content classification are not just box ticking exercises. They are the architecture of the long-term market access. And the ethics gap is ours to close. India's governance framework is deliberately light touch now. Yes. There is a reason for doing that. They have done it for purpose. And that window will not stay open forever. And the organizations that build responsible AI practices now, bias audits, documentation, grievance mechanism will lead the market when enforcement arrives. So I think this is the right time for us to have this discussion. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.